Hi everyone, I'm Rita Kakati-Shah, your host for The Uma Show. Welcome to your one-stop journey for feeling empowered. We're a platform for change. We build confidence. We are your voice. We want you to be bold, be you, be Uma. Today, we're exploring women in policy, and I'm really excited to be joined by a goddess of go-getting, Reshma Patel. She's joining us from New York City, and she is a public finance expert. Welcome, Reshma. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. So talk to us a bit about your background. How did you grow up?
So I was born in India, in Gujarat, and I came to this country as a child with my parents. And I grew up in a town called Lowell, Massachusetts, outside of Boston. And, I grew up in, an immigrant family. My father had come here for graduate school, and we, at the time, didn't have any family here. But as I got older, my parents, once they became citizens, my grandparents came, and all my parents' siblings came, and we have quite a bit of really large family, and a family where education is really stressed. And one of the reasons why my father wanted to stay in Massachusetts was, we would drive to Cambridge, Mass, and he would always say, one of these days you'll go to school here at Harvard or MIT. And I ended up going to MIT, and my sister ended up going to Harvard. So that was my father's, big dream.
And he called the shots right there. So I was actually going to say that education actually plays a very strong part, actually, specifically in South Asian families. And obviously that was a big ethos that drove you. So can you talk to us a little bit about, what you studied? You went to MIT. What did you study, and how did that actually impact your career choices?
Sure. So, my career choices have been unusual, both for a South Asian and for an MIT alum. As a young student in, high school and elementary school, I really was focused on math and sciences, like a lot of South Asian students, and had participated in science fairs, math Olympiads, and, hence ended up at MIT. But I always knew that I wanted to do something that was going to make a big impact in the world. And I always felt that was through public policy. And I chose to major in economics and political science.
Is that what led you later on to your volunteer and advocacy work?
Yes, partially, but I think it started at a younger age. As I mentioned, my father was the first in his family to come here. We come from a village and agrarian roots, and this mentality that when you rise, you bring everyone up with you, right? And so my father was the first to come, and he brought so many other relatives with him. And so this idea of community and giving back was always there. And we had in the small town that I grew up in, but I was volunteering there as a high school student. And I continued that work in volunteerism in college, but also when I moved to New York, and even while I was working, because not only did I want to give back, but it's also added so much to my life, because I believe that you should believe in something bigger than yourself. And I think that, so that's what, led to this commitment to, kind of public service.
And also it came from to your point, from your parents' upbringing, and also them being a role model in your own family and community as well, by sort of steering the ship and showing you this is what you do. You pave the way, you give back, you help others. You don't just leave them behind, you pull them along the way as well. So can you tell us a little bit more about the actual advocacy and volunteer work that you do?
Sure. So I have been involved in many different nonprofit groups over the years during my time in New York. Most currently, I serve as vice chair of the budget committee on my local community board, which in New York City is your local level of government, because we are such a large city. A community board represents about 100,000 people, and if it was a smaller city, it would be like a city council. And I'm also serving on the Environments and Parks Committee there to try to make sure that we have better green spaces in our city. I most recently served as board co-chair of Chaya Community Development Corporation. And that's an organization that helps immigrants settle in this country, works with immigrants to get their citizenship, to get them good housing, to teach them financial literacy, teach them English, and all sorts of things that they need to build a good life in this country. I've also been a volunteer for a long time with Sakhi for South Asian Women, helping women who are coming out of domestic violence situations. And I love the arts, and I've served as a board member of Dance NYC and advocating for a more vibrant and integrated arts community here in New York City.
What fabulous work that you're doing. And you're also, speaking of New York City, you're actually running currently for New York City Comptroller. So for those of us here, and this is a global audience that you're speaking to currently, what exactly does that mean, and what does this role entail?
Sure. And even for people who live in New York City, not many people know what a New York City Comptroller is. So New York City Comptroller is one of 3 citywide offices that we have here in New York. One is the mayor, which most people tend to be familiar with, which is like the CFO of the city. The other is the comptroller, which is the CFO of the city, and really handling the city's finances, as well as doing the city's audits and having oversight role, and having a role in holding all our city officials accountable. And my career has been in public finance, which has been helping finance infrastructure projects such as building schools, roads, bridges, airports for state and local governments. And through this work, I've worked very closely with New York City and the New York City Comptroller's office, and served for a financial advisor for the city comptroller for over 8 years. And so this is what brings me to want to run for this office in particular.
That's fantastic, because it's almost like a natural progression for you. You were doing the work anyway. You saw kind of potential gaps and holes where you think you could actually advocate for. So, wishing you all the best of luck for that. Going to be following you closely. Obviously, you are a woman, a very senior woman in the work that you do. Did you actually ever face any barriers in your work that you do?
So like all women, I have faced barriers. And I think the biggest barrier for women is even to get to that senior position. And I think that especially as a woman, as a child of immigrants, we're taught that you study hard, you work hard, and that's how you succeed. But that only gets to a certain point. And I found that after a certain point, you really need to understand the culture and be able to navigate corporate systems. And luckily, I had people who were very supportive of me, and I had encouragement. But I did have to fight. It was being able to have a seat at the table, making your voice heard, and making sure that you got the kind of work that you wanted to. And sometimes they would go to, if it's a quantitative project, they would automatically think, oh, let's give it to a male. But it was something that you had to speak up and say, hey, I can do this work. I want to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's such true thoughts that you said, because a lot of people think, you just do it, just hard work and that will get you done. But the power of networking, the power of who finding that champion, finding the internal sponsor that can help as well is so, so essential, especially when you navigate an area that you want to make a difference in as well. So going on the back of that, could you talk to us about a particular challenge that you might have faced, either personally or professionally, and how you overcame it?
Sure. I think the biggest challenge of my life is happening right now as I run for public office. It is like nothing else. And I worked, very hard for many years, I thought, but this is, an incredible challenge. And to take a step back from that, I left a career in finance, which lasted almost 20 years, where I had done well and I had reached all the goalposts. And I decided to leave that to do something that for me, I thought was going to make a greater impact, and the commitment to service that I had from a young age. And that was a big challenge because, we live in a society that kind of puts metrics around what you do and how much money you earn or what your title is. And I kind of gave all of that up to then build something new. And I devoted the last 5 years of my life to working with nonprofit organizations, to organizing communities to get out the vote and being an advocate. And then I didn't know I'd be running for this office, but now that's led to this next big step in my life.
What's been your most fun part of your campaign so far?
So it's been, many wonderful things in this campaign. And I think the most fun is going and meeting people in the community. New York City is vast, and there are people from just everywhere in the world. And it's amazing to me how many, different types of communities exist here, and just meeting people, understanding their needs, and, getting to, I've traveled extensively in my personal life and bonding with people like, oh yeah, I know where you're from. I've been there. And that's just been a lot of fun to talk about people's life experiences.
Yeah, and you're a very people's person, so just going out there and actually meeting, it's cultural, to your point as well, about getting in there and doing what you love doing. So in the world of Reshma, what do you like to do to relax, given that you're always so on the go?
So my favorite thing is fitness. I haven't found a fitness class in New York City. I haven't tried, I think. And before this campaign started, I was working out all the time, and dance fitness is my stress reliever. I love it. And I was doing it every day. I also really enjoy yoga and Pilates. Unfortunately, these days, I don't have so much time for it, but that's what keeps me grounded. And once I'm doing that, I don't think of anything else.
So what did you do specifically during the pandemic to keep yourself active and mindful?
Yes, and so the pandemic was hard. Last March, all the fitness studios shut down, and I had to move, like everyone else, to doing everything virtually. And thankfully, so many of the fitness teachers that I liked and worked with were able to move to Zoom and doing classes on Zoom. And it is amazing to me how they have been able to work me as hard as they did in person over Zoom. So, and it's been such an amazing support system throughout the pandemic and even now as I run, because they have been my biggest champions.
Before we let you go, Reshma, if you were to talk to your younger self or any women that are watching today, what would you say to them if they wanted to follow in your footsteps?
I would say you can do anything you want. And I think, we need to teach young girls that they can achieve anything. I luckily had a father who told me, we would sit there at the dinner table and we would watch something on TV and he'd be like, someday you're going to do that. Someday you'll win a Nobel Prize. Someday you'll be in the Olympics. Someday you'll run for office. And I want all young women to have that belief that they can do anything and to not be bound by what society has set out for you, and to really think creatively and do what your heart is telling you to do. And I'm hoping by running right now, I can set an example for a lot of young women in my community here and around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said. Thank you so much, Reshma, for sharing your inspiring story with us today. Reshma Patel, public finance expert. And thank you to viewers for joining us on this empowerment journey. We want you all to embrace that inner goddess of go-getting. We want you to be bold, be you, be Uma.